for folks who aren't able to join us. So I hope you're all in place for today. We are going to be talking about coaching across cultures. It is a topic that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time, and I hope that we can all learn from each other. So please do drop any thoughts or any questions in the chat as we go along. And so if you are just joining us, we're just introducing ourselves. So again, my name is Mo Fong, and I am based out here in Bay Area, California, and my country of origin is Taiwan. And what brought me here today is I've learned a ton around crossing across culture, coaching across culture from many coaches now that I've come across, and I thought I'd codify it for not only myself, but for this group so we can have a robust conversation and help to deepen our coaching with our clients. So just as a quick introduction, I had a very unconventional career in coaching journey. I studied engineering but wanted to teach, so I taught high school for a while, math and chemistry, which led me to wanting to start a school that led me to study business and eventually landed me in tech for about 15 years, and then started to think about entrepreneurship as I thought about starting my own coaching practice. And as you'll see, I was certified with Hudson Institute, became ACC certified through ICF, and gathered a lot of other frameworks to use before starting a nonprofit called the Asian Women Coaching Collective, which I alluded to as helping have informed this presentation today by talking to our coaches there, and certainly love ICF as a community of learning. So today we're going to cover why is culture important and what exactly is culture, and also thinking about for ourselves what is our own culture, and then looking at five distinct aspects of culture from research, and then really try to apply it and think about the implications for our coaching. So what brought folks here today? So I see some folks in the chat. They said, I'm interested as I support Mexicans. Anna's based out in Mexico. We're working with leaders and colleagues in the US. Very good. And for others, it's culture is just part of our lives. Yes, even if we live in the US, you're all from all different parts of the world, which is amazing. Brazil, I know someone is here from Uganda, which is also amazing. Interest and curiosity, there's also many other folks here as well. And if you do want to share your LinkedIn to connect with folks afterwards, that's great. So someone's is wow, based in Spain and from China and have been living and working cross-culturally for 25 years and find this an interesting topic. Fantastic. Okay. So why culture? Why is it important? And what is culture? So if you look at the ICF mission and vision, you'll also see that in the vision statement of ICF, they envision a world where coaching is integral to transforming societies. Now, we're not able to transform societies without first understanding the cultures and the origins of those cultures. So, this is very integral to what we do as coaches. And we all need to understand what cultural intelligence is. We all know EQ and PQ for some of us, positive intelligence, emotional intelligence. But this professor, Professor Rockstall, says when leaders work in cross-border contexts, and I would even say within different organizations, because it sometimes feels that different functional areas and different organizations are different cultures as well. He says the expectations about preferred leadership styles, managerial behaviors, and the nature of relationships are all influenced by culture. And I would argue that our coaching style and our approaches are also influenced by our cultures. So, what is culture? So, this is where we get a little more interactive. So, if you are able to text or put into the chat, how would you define culture? What is culture to you? Wisdom of the crowds. What does culture mean to you? So, there's no textbook definition of culture, right? So, you're not going to get this wrong if you say what you think culture is, but it's something that we can sense. And certainly, if we think about our childhoods, right? This was me when I was 5. Can you kind of guess what environment I grew up in? But that's not the only way we can define our culture. It's also by how we dress, right? So I advanced slides a little too quickly, but you'll see that when I coach at Harvard Business School, I noticed something very interesting. 48% of my coaching clients were Asian. This is between 2021 to today. And about 34% of those were Asian women. So I know from growing up too that I was always trying to seek where I belonged. I really wanted to know if people could understand me. And that's partly because I immigrated from Taiwan when I was 5 to Michigan. And my sister and I were the only Asians in the entire school. So can you imagine like the what they call culture shock, right? So where was I going to find understanding? So I put this slide together because I compared it with the overall population of this year's class. And this hovers around the same for every single class that goes to Harvard Business School every year. And if only 25% are self-identified as Asian, or 29% with multi-dimensional reporting, then how is it that my coaching clients, 48% were Asian? So they may have been looking for something that they could relate to just from my description of who I was or how I looked. And during the pandemic, I started the Asian Women Coaching Collective because I noticed that in my coaching certification program, there weren't very many Asians. And I was very curious how they were experiencing their coaching and also these certification programs, which did not include a lot of conversations about culture, coaching from a cultural lens. So AWCC was started about 5 years ago. Our mission statement was to catalyze Asian women coaches to live with cultural authenticity and congruence by building a strong community where they can discover and be discovered. And it grew from just a small group of 10, and now we have about 80. And we started these Stronger Together series where we were just sharing with each other different frameworks and the different ways we thought about our coaching from a cultural lens. And one of our members, this is 100% volunteer run, started a podcast called Magnolia Talks, which, if you're interested, you can listen to conversations where we discuss culturally responsive coaching. So we started interviewing with the intention to learn more and how to codify culture and culturally responsive coaching. And after about 15 interviews, we started to see a pattern. Many people said culture is not always visible, but always present. So that culture is a pair of colored glasses of how you're seeing the world. And your client is wearing one too. So this is from Kevin. And they said, your glasses are probably different than someone else's glasses. So we're seeing the world very differently. We also learned that shared background builds trust, but empathy builds access. So, what may lead clients to choose you may be shared background. This is not just about race, right? And a couple of coaches said, you do not need to be an expert, but you do need to do some research. So, if you're coaching someone you don't really know much about by way of their background or what they do as their role, you may need to do some research. Another coach said, you want to be comfortable enough that if someone says, you know what I'm talking about, right? That you can actually say yes and honestly be able to say yes. Another discovery and observation was that many clients carry internalized cultural narratives that must be surfaced. So, how often when they come with a challenge or a problem, that's actually not really the problem we as coaches need to address. We need to go a little deeper because there are themes of shame, face, self-erasure, and the pressure to succeed repeatedly shows up for these Asian women coaches. But you can probably relate to different themes that may show up for your clients. And so Julie says culture is based on guilt. Go on vacation, spend money, we feel guilty. This is specifically for Asian culture, but maybe for others too. But for Adeline, she says success supersedes authenticity, which is interesting, right? Pride, shame, and face, not just for you or for our clients, but also as a reflection of our family. So if you think about your clients and the burdens that they carry, it's not just about them most of the time. It's about all of the family and other extension of who they are and how they identify. Just two more observations. One is that culturally responsive coaching means coaching the person and the system, their system that they came from. So as we do these one-on-one coaching, we're intently focused on being present for them, but we need to try to understand the system they're coming from and the values that their culture brings as well. That's from Nilu. And the last pattern that we saw from these interviews is that receiving coaching sometimes carries the stigma that you are broken. Whoops, let me see if I can go back. So, so many cultures, coaching kind of falls into that same bucket as mental health, therapy, going to a doctor. And oftentimes people are resistant to going to doctors because it's admitting that we need help. And that is cultural as well. So Jan offers this, view it like this. Coaching is a badge of honor. It means the company is investing in you or that you are investing in yourself if it's not coaching sponsored by a company. And D also says mental health has a pretty big stigma in most cultures, right? Coaching can come in and be introduced under a different light, right? So the analogy I like to give is that even the most star athletes, the Olympians, also have coaches. So if you have a coach, it's not stigmatized at all. So those were some of the observations when we interviewed our Asian Women Coaching Collective. So now we're going to talk about what is your culture. So some of this is working to understand our own self-awareness about what our own culture is. So as a quick definition, and this is from Michelle Gelfand, who is a cultural psychologist at the Stanford Graduate School of Business. She studies tight and loose cultures, and she says culture is this invisible force that's affecting us all the time. It's omnipresent but invisible. It's a set of norms, values, and beliefs about what is appropriate and what we're socialized into it through parents, teachers, and institutions. So, what's really bizarre is that even though it profoundly shapes how we operate in the world, we rarely think about it. So, we're going to take some time today to really not only think about it, but to really feel it. So, are you ready to go in there with me? So, we're going to do an exercise called Unearthing Your Culture. And if you feel comfortable with your eyes open, you can do this. Or if you want to close your eyes, because it's going to be imagining yourself in a different world and you want to clear your mind, be in a place of free attention. So just close your eyes, take a couple of deep breaths, clear your mind of all your worries. And I want you to place yourself in a world that is foreign to you. Perhaps you've just stepped off a plane. Perhaps you've just gone through a door into a room of people that you're not familiar with. How are you feeling right now? And if you're stepping into this place, you may or may not have come through before. If you're experiencing something that is not familiar, what do you notice about the sights, the sounds, maybe even the smells? As you're working your way through the room, who are you looking for? Are there any rituals or ways that people are talking that seem different? Perhaps you like to start a conversation. Is it a language that's familiar to you or not? Check inside. How are you feeling now? So, with all the sounds and the smells, watching the people, is there anything that you're missing that you wish was different? What are some of the things you feel like you need to do to feel like you belong? Okay, we're going to come back to this room. You can open your eyes. What did you sense? What did you feel? Either put in the chat or if you want to take yourself off mute. Love to hear. Felt alone, felt lost, groundless. And if you can expand a little bit more, what made you feel alone or what made you feel lost? Yes, and what were the things you were missing? Was there anything specific that you felt was missing?
It's easy for me to talk than to write,
Yeah, it's
but
same.
I would say I'm an immigrant, so I don't live in my home birth country, and sometimes it's the way we talk, the way people. I'm in Latin America. I'm from Uruguay, living in Peru. So the way the conversations are developed and the way I approach a new person, the questions I ask, it's totally different. I miss a lot that.
Mm,
I miss a straightforward question. How are you? Where were you? What about your job? Oh, wonderful. You buy a new, I don't know, whatever. Where did you buy it? It's beautiful. And here it's like, okay, with the round and round and
mm,
round for a question and for an answer. And that I miss a lot of it. It drives me crazy.
yeah.
Even when you ask a close question like yes or no, the answers could be different. So I miss a lot that the way we talk
Yeah,
um,
what's
um,
coming up for me when you describe that is sometimes those beginning conversations can feel transactional versus like,
yes,
do I
yes,
really want to know who you are? Do I really care? And do I really want to know?
hmm
Versus
hmm
transactional. That's what came up for me as you were describing that. Yeah. Anything else in the scenarios that or the images that came up for anyone else? See in the chat. I think,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
actually, I'm from Argentina. We are neighbors with Uruguay, and I live in Switzerland. And when I imagine a scenario, I was thinking not in the city where I live because I feel comfortable because everybody speak English or French or even Italian or Spanish. But I imagine myself in the countryside of
Mm,
Switzerland, no?
mm,
Um, what I needed in that situation was to know what they knew, what lay beneath the word, what is
yes.
implicit. And that's what they are unit by the implicit, what is not say, that's a big issue for me.
Yeah. What's implied and what's stated directly, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good example. Anna says in the chat, I didn't understand the interactions around me. Yeah, it can be very confusing. I felt like I didn't belong in this new world, like I was separate, and I felt less confident. Felt less confident. Yes. I can imagine that can happen for a lot of clients if you have coaching clients that need to move, right? How are they feeling and how are they navigating? Great. So now I'd like to kind of keep those thoughts in your mind, right? About how much of these types of experiences show up when we are experiencing new cultures. So I did quite a bit of research and distilled it down to 5 aspects of culture that we can think about when we're coaching, and also for ourselves as we navigate new cultures. So the first one is around communications, and we just had some examples of that. Is it direct or indirect? How do we tend to express disagreements of feedback as well? How do we communicate conflicts or opinions? That's when things get really spicy, right? When we're communicating fine, there's nothing much that we can say about that. But we also experience tight and loose norms, right? How important is it to follow the rules and conform to expectations? And some of you who have traveled can see this with traffic patterns, right? You know, when I went to India, they said, "Oh yeah, the traffic lights are just guidelines. It's not you actually have to stop on red." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then also, how do we operate in a rule-bound or flexible environment, right? So tight and loose norms. Individualism versus collectivism. When you make decisions, do you consider personal or group family goals more often? This came up in the interviews as well with the Asian Women Coaching Collective, right? Like that, every decision that we make is not just for us, but it's the collective decision that we make for our families too. Hierarchy and egalitarianism. How much do you value hierarchy and respect for authority in relationships? For the longest time when I was working in tech, I always defer to my superiors, right? Like my manager, their manager, so on and so forth. But I heard much later that no, 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 like we want to hear your opinions. It's not just about what we want you to do, but what do you think we should do? Like just pretend we are on the same level. And like such a hard time making that mental adjustment. Right? It's kind of like when I was teaching high school, I went back to interview at my old high school, and all my former teachers like, "Oh, just call me Stan, not Mr. Oberg." I'm like, "I can't do it. You're always gonna be, that honorific teacher in my mind." And the last piece is this task versus relationship orientation. Do you prioritize accomplishing tasks or building relationships first? What does your client seem to value more in your coaching? Connection or results? The task, like just give me my to-do list versus let me get to know you first before I can help advise or coach you. So let's dig into these a little bit deeper. We talked about direct and indirect communication, right? So it could be very explicit, very direct. It could also be very indirect, right? So as coaches, we're learning how to read the entire person, right? Not just what they say verbatim, right? But also how are they sitting? What's their demeanor, their tone, all of that, just in the language that we use with each other. But we also can communicate with what we wear, with how we stand, all of those things. And one example is Madeleine Albright was famous for her pins. In fact, there's a whole website called Read My Pin, right? And this pin is a dove. Every time she went to the Middle East, she wore this pin that was given to her by the widow of one of the leaders, Yasser Yabin. I'm gonna butcher this. It's Yitzhak Rabin, and Leah Rabin was the one who gave her the pin. And she's basically saying that we need to be doves, right? And that's indirect communication, right? Tight and loose culture. You follow rules like punctuality, being orderly, self-disciplined, right? And you can tell if you are tight or loose just by your coaching sessions. If your coachee or your client is late 5 minutes, how do you feel? If you're like, oh, they're late 5 minutes, I'm getting kind of frustrated, you probably are more comfortable with a tight culture versus a loose culture is more tolerant of differences, being a little bit more disorganized, a little bit less rules abiding. Um, and there's benefits of either or, right? Loose culture, maybe a little bit looser in terms of creativity and innovation. But this example was about a Japanese airline that had basically crashed, and there was a huge fireball. And everyone, because of Japanese culture, really understood that you need to listen very intently to the flight attendant, very orderly, follow the rules, leave your bags, leave all of your bags, right? And they were able to evacuate everyone without any casualties, which is absolutely incredible. How many passengers were on the plane that had to deplane within 20 minutes? Can anyone guess how many people were on this plane? 379. And without that loose or tight culture distinction, they were a tight culture. They deplaned very quickly, and it actually can save lives, right? I have examples the other way around where a loose culture may be beneficial. So it's really context dependent. Not saying any one of these is good or bad, right? It's just different. There's also the individualism, collectivism. So individualism is look after yourself or maybe even your immediate family, but the self is defined as being independent, right? Personal achievement, autonomy, self-expression. And in a collectivist culture, the idea here is that we were born into cohesive groups, that we are together interdependent, and we have developed relationships where harmony, respect, and duty are highly valued or part of a value system. So many of you may hear this phrase, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, right? So if you're going to start your own company, we're going to bootstrap the company, right? You're going to do this yourself, right? Get this done. And we are going to have personal achievement and we're going to be able to do this autonomously. But there's also the flip side, right? Because there may be, one cartoons I ran across was that somebody was in such poverty that they didn't even have boots, right? So when you tell somebody you pull yourself up by your bootstrap when they don't even have boots, like how are they supposed to do that and have that individual, do it yourself mentality when in some cultures it's actually no, we're in this together. We're going to share boots, if you will, right? Though another dimension, this is the fourth one, is hierarchy versus egalitarianism. Where can this show up? Right? Egalitarian cultures are usually recognizing each other as equals, right? They're showing concern for each other's welfare and common good. And there's also this notion that everyone's roles are valued equally, right? Versus egalitarianism, where people are seen as moral equals, or sorry, hierarchy is the unequal distribution of power, roles, and resources, whereas egalitarianism is everyone are equals and we have shared responsibilities. So a leader who is more egalitarian will say, hey, you know what? We've just had a big conference, but I'm not above, putting out the signs or picking up trash because everyone's kind of in this together. Another way it can show up is even seating arrangements, right? So this is an example of a wedding where there's a head table and then there's guests of honor and then everybody else. And then the further back you are from the head table, that kind of already shows you where you are in your hierarchy. But you also have this showing up in corporate settings, right? The infamous corner offices, right? That is a sign of who is in charge versus open seating where everyone has the exact same table. And in some cases now, seating is not even assigned, right? So this is how it can show up in our physical environments. And then the last dimension is about tasks and relationships, right? Task orientation is just do whatever it takes. Time is important, and so is deadlines. Do not waste time. And then a relationship driven as type of orientation is we're going to build rapport before tasks can be accomplished. I remember when I was given a project at work, and it was a cross-functional project where I had to work with somebody at YouTube. I went to go talk to the person. I'm like, okay, here's my agenda, right? I don't want to waste his time. 5 things we need to cover in 1 hour. And I was a little horrified because 45 minutes had passed. We didn't cover a single agenda item. We were just talking about our friends, our family, things that we've experienced in our different times at the company. And then around 45 minutes, and he's like, okay, we're good now. Now that we've gotten to know each other, now we can do some business together. I was like, what is going on? I came in trying not to waste his time, but in actuality, he wanted to get to know me better before we can actually work together. So very different orientation. It was kind of jarring. Um, so this illustrates the point with a cartoon that says, let's get drinks because I don't think we've had enough time at work to talk about our coworkers we hate, right? It's just this whole notion like, how is that time spent? Is it on tasks or relationships? So now that we've gone through the 5, what are the implications for our coaching? So it can come with opportunities, but also blind spots if we're not aware as we coach. So the opportunities that we bring, if our cultures with our clients are very different, is that we could potentially offer fresh perspectives and challenge cultural blind spots if it's done with empathy and humility. So, like I said, none of these dichotomies have any judgments attached to them, right? But we do need to understand if those are our blind spots or our clients' blind spots, and we approach it with some empathy and humility. I would also argue that it can foster curiosity. Cultures are fascinating, especially for those of you who were born somewhere else, raised somewhere else, and then now are in a completely different place. Brazil to Switzerland. Whoa, right? But there could be some more curiosity if you want to learn more and deepen your clients' reflections on identity, values, and contexts, so they can have these breakthrough moments about who they are and how they operate in the world. And lastly, the opportunity of demonstrating the respect and openness to building trust and credibility, even without shared identity. So as coaches, we offer space, right? And by offering that space to explore someone's culture, it can really help to build that trust relationship and the credibility that you have with your clients. Now, just to call out some blind spots, because we all have blind spots, if you have assumed shared meaning in communication styles, that can get you in a lot of challenges, right? Because if you assume that everyone's going to communicate like you with words or even in silences, eye contact or enthusiasm can mean completely different things with different cultures. If you have opportunities and blind spots you'd like to share as well, feel free to put them in chat. I'll pause after this slide, and so we can have some discussions. Another blind spot here is that we sometimes are uncomfortable talking about cultures that we're not familiar with. So the opposite of trust and credibility is that if we avoid these topics completely, no, or, race blind, color blind, culture blind, all of that, we're just not going to talk about it and we avoid them, that actually is a detriment. So that's our own blind spots if we avoid. And the last piece to note, and many of you already know about unconscious biases. So these are shortcuts that our brains take if we don't have a lot of time, right? So are there biases where the clients haven't really defined their cultural experiences and don't know what they are, and so they're just kind of defining it based on the environment that they're in? But without that self-awareness, they may be also having some of these unconscious biases as they operate with their own teams or with the people that they're coming to coaching about, right, or their own challenges. So if your clients have unconscious biases and we're not addressing them from a cultural lens, that may not serve them well, right? That you may have to open up that maybe there's something culturally that we're experiencing here. Other opportunities or blind spots that you have experienced as you apply culturally responsive coaching to your practices? If you run into any challenges, you can certainly discuss them. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well. A lot of information to digest. A lot of it surrounds communication and figuring out what you value and what your identity is based on your culture. And that informs how we behave and how we operate in the world. So let's build our own cultural dashboards. So I've created this simple dashboard. Happy to share this dashboard offline, but just if you have any paper or if you want to just make a mental note, we're going to pause for a minute. So we talked about direct, indirect communication styles, tight versus loose social norms about rules following, individualism versus collectivism, and then hierarchy versus egalitarianism, and then task and relationship work orientation. You want to rate yourself on a dimension of 1 through 10, and then just pause for a minute and see what you notice. We'll give everyone some time to think and to respond. So when you are ready, go ahead and take a look at where you've rated. Is there any patterns, right? And how were they informed by where you are now, or if this is just part of your identity that hasn't shifted? Another way to think about this is this may be a snapshot of where you are now, but has any of this changed over time? Would anyone like to offer any self-reflections in the chat or taking yourself off mute? Love to hear. I know this is a pretty big group, so if you're shy about sharing, that's okay. If I can just offer up some of questions as you look into this a little deeper for yourself, right? If you see patterns, right, that's one thing to note. If you ask yourself what's shifted for you over time, try to understand what are some of the influences that have had it shift over time. And then for the future, where would you like it to shift over time? Sarah, thanks for raising your hand. What would you like to share?
I'm happy to share. I think what I noticed, definitely in the way I was raised in a military family, so very much structured by rules. I went to a boarding school from the age of 8, so very much structured and rule-driven and done by the bell. But as I've kind of become my own adult, there's a definite shift. I mean, if I had filled this out 30 years ago, it would be very, very different to what I've just filled out now. So that shift in, more over to the egalitarian and the hierarchy, I definitely move away from that. And it's definitely about relationship over results. So I do see a shift. Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much.
it's that individual choice as I've made my own choices. It's what was, how the environment you've grown up in, and then that's that point where you make your own choices.
Yeah. Are there any dimensions, not to put you on the spot, but any dimensions that you would want to shift more in any direction?
Yeah, definitely. I think probably a little bit looser around the social norms, but probably sit a little bit on the tight side rather than the loose side. I'd like to move that a bit more.
Mhm. Mhm.
But that's probably the main one.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think awareness is step one, right? Just knowing what you want for yourself. In the chat, someone said, I think direct, indirect is interesting for me because it tends to depend on who I'm around and what the assumed culture is. It's inconsistent for me. Yeah. And we're not saying, again, good or bad, right? Like maybe it needs to be inconsistent based on who you're around, right? And their own perspectives and how they, want you to behave sometimes and how much you're willing to bend based on that situation. Another person says, I noticed that after 20 years as a British person living in Mexico, the influence of all the Mexican culture has shifted nearly all of these. Wow, that's amazing, right? I think what this says for me is humans are adaptable, you know? One of the, questions I had when I was working in a big company is mergers and acquisitions, right? When a company with a set culture acquires another company, does the dominant culture always take over? Right? Like cells in a petri dish, right? But what happens when the company that's acquired also has a strong culture? How do you navigate that? Right? Always fascinating. Living in North America as an Asian woman, sometimes, no, sorry, living in Northern Africa as an Asian woman, sometimes I feel I got lost here because culture itself is individualized. It's very interesting. Right? How much of the cultural definitions would reside within subgroups of a bigger culture? And I'd love to hear if you're happy to jump on. I'm not quite sure what culture as individualized culture means. Can you have a culture onto yourself, versus it being about relationships?
Hi, I'm the one who wrote
Yes.
it. Sorry, I can turn on the videos. Here in North Africa, as you many of you know, they call it mélange in French, so mixed well, Arab culture and French culture, and also African culture. So people here, they can change their hat or change their mask according to the situation they are in. And I was very fascinated by how they really adjust to the situation they are in. Sometimes they really act like French. Sometimes they really act like Arab, and they don't lose their African roots. And as a Korean woman who's from, many people call our culture as a monoculture. So I learned a lot from their, attitude, and their favorite saying is that in their Arabic, everyone is different. So I needed to really keep it in my mind so that I don't really are puzzled or get lost whenever I really had to something to really deal with regarding some important decisions and sometimes negotiation. So yeah, hopefully I conveyed well. yeah, what I felt.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that's why it's sometimes so hard to navigate, right? Because you're dealing with multiple cultural influences all at once. So, you know, it may not always be clear, like what's the style, what's the culture that you're even in or you have to apply, right, to be effective. Thank you so much for sharing. Very good insight. Okay. So I'm going to move on. So we debriefed already. I created this cultural dashboard that's more like a web app. Does something very similar, but with only like four, the scale of four. But you'll notice that it's not only your own cultural preferences, but you get to do the same thing for your clients' cultural preferences. And if they're not filling it out themselves, you can also fill it out for them, like take your best guess, right? Because you've been working with them for a while, they may know or may not know. And then what this does is after everything's filled out, it'll give you some coaching insights based on how similar you are with your clients' styles and cultural preferences. So when I did this, you know, everything was sort of similar except this task relationship focus, right? It says just watch out for your client actually values connection. So spend time building rapport before diving into the task. Just as a heads up reminder, right? And I'm sure you can do this without the, you know, having to use this tool at all. But if you're interested, I'm more than happy to share. It's still in development, but kind of gets us there. So the final thoughts um, on ABCs, right? So the ABCs of culturally responsive coaching or coaching across cultures. A is to ask, don't assume. So you may see behaviors and interpret how they're talking, but that might be learned behaviors versus their cultural behaviors, right? That they're more innate with. So you have to use inquiry to surface client values and meaning making. So asking and not assuming. B is just building your awareness. So noticing and naming potential cultural dimensions at play. This is the part where you have to do some research, right? So building your awareness. So even doing some research on your own and reading, there's plenty of books that are out there. Um, and then calibrating with intention. So now that you have awareness, how will you calibrate your coaching practice? So how do you adjust the tone, the timing, your methods based on the cultural context that your clients are in? So thank you. That is the end of the presentation. Happy to stick around for more discussion, Q&A. Greatest gift you can give is to complete the survey. I'm still developing more research around this topic and what's helpful, what's not helpful. So if I speak to more coaches, I'd love to know what I need to pause on or spend more or less time on. And if you complete the survey, I'll also give you the link to the cultural dashboard if you want to play around with that as well. There's a link, it's all online, so you don't have to deal with paper if you want to work with this a little bit more and to remember the 5 dimensions. So that's pretty much it. Are there any questions? Feel free to put it into the chat. Hi, Leah, go ahead.
Oh, hi. I was
Hi.
just wondering, since I'm on desktop, do you mind putting the survey link in the chat?
Oh, that is a great point. I am happy to do that.
And thank you so much for doing this work. I've seen this framework before in different ways, but I love it applied to coaching.
Oh, you're welcome. So welcome. Give me 1 second. I will put it in the chat in just a minute. If you have a phone, you can also just take a QR photo. Let me get out of my stop sharing and I will put it in the chat. Give me 1 second. See, that was great feedback in itself to put the link as something you can type in. Okay. Go. Where is the link to the survey? There you go. It's a very short survey, only 3 questions, but that would be super helpful. Any other questions? I'm more than happy to take them in the chat as well or live.